Hello.
Huge fire right here. Welcome. Let's see. Anyway, out here at Donald's, for the new people. I've been on here for a while, but this is the first one I saw something very similar. Welcome in person. Same. Oh, we've been in program for a couple months. We're twice a month. First Tuesday of the month is lecture night, and tonight we have Dakota Smith talking about Selenium. And then in 2 weeks we have Coding Night, where we're going to be continuing our work through a blackjack game and do a test-driven development. At least that's kind of was available with other developer group at the same time.
Not here, but there is another Python meetup the same night, I think.
I think it's more the developer in general.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you're something that's been space.
Might be.
What's that? Yeah. Yeah. One group over top of it. All right. Just a couple notes. If anyone parked on the street, you are welcome to park in the parking lots on either side of the building, so you don't have to fight for parking. Then also we have a background list in the taking away, and we'll do that raffle at the end of the meeting. Should stick around. Has everyone gotten themselves a stack of Wilson notes in the Sharpie? If not, we'll grab you one in a bit. What we've been doing with the past couple meetings is go over. So if you have any note, comments, questions, either for Dakota as a speaker or me as part of the meeting in general, feel free to write it down and whatever feedback you want to give. With that, my personal note on Selenium and what makes me kind of excited about this is one of way back in the day when I was first learning to code in VBA, my boss at the time told me that he had once automated his computer to automatically check in and move his flights 24 hours ahead of time to get the best boarding situation. I was like, that's amazing. So stuff you can do with automating your browser is fantastic. Without further ado, Dakota Smith, talk about Selenium.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y'all. Quick little taking temperature. How many people have used Selenium before? Okay, cool. Slightly familiar with it. Have used some sort of browser automation framework? Yeah? Okay. What other things are we going to be talking about? How many of you have a development workflow that incorporates IPython? Do you like to use IPython? Are you familiar with it? Am I going to be showing you too many new things at once? Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, this is going to start with like 9 slides, and then we're going to be coding and talking about code and why we make the decisions that we do. So it's a little more ad hoc than some of the talks that I've seen here, but I think that I've been in this group, and I know that this group can have a good rapport and isn't afraid to speak their mind or ask questions, and definitely encourage you to do that as we sort of break out of the first part. But the first part is the part where you understand what we're doing, because we got to set the tone. And the tone is stupid. Selenium tricks. I'm really happy to be here. I think Python is a great community. I think it's the best programming language, and communities like this and meetups like this are basically why. So, me, Dakota Smith. That since 1997 is not when I was born, it's when I started working in software quality assurance. I started in manual quality assurance, moved into manual QA with reproducible environments, and then automated deployments, and sort of did some DevOps stuff, and moved into automated browser testing, and then automated browser stuff, and then a test data framework, and then multi-platform, multi-user testing, and so like I've kind of done the trajectory from manual QA to test platform architect, I guess, if that were a title. And that's me when we launch. I love software automation. It's great. So why Selenium? A lot of times people are like, why not Puppeteer? Why not Playwright? Why not Cypress? And those are my answers. Selenium's actually open source. Those other ones are actually, the governing body is a giant corporation. It's Microsoft, it's Google, it's, well, it's Cypress. They don't have a giant corporation, but they have their own problems. And again, their goal is to automate a browser. Everything else is a specific application about automating a browser. Cypress isn't actually automating a browser. It's taking as many shortcuts as you can take to make something that can test a website, mostly if it's mostly conventional. Finally, a real browser lets you work on top of real computers if you have other automation that you have to tie into. You can test real extensions. You can use real proxies. You can open multiple real tabs. All of these things are actually happening in a browser that has a profile that can be stored on disk and shared. And so if you need to have portability in your logged in states, it's really great for that too, in a way that, again, the other tools don't necessarily have like first order accommodations for. I'm not like completely dogmatic about this. I do think that in general, if someone else is writing the tests, they can write them in whatever they want. So what are the components of a browser automation framework? Test scripts, you can just take the word test off of there too, but they're interchangeable. And these are kind of in order that they come, the opposite order of what you end up with, right? Like, so the test scripts are kind of the last thing you have. Logging you kind of get as you develop page objects because you need logging. After you've subclassed a WebDriver and have some data providers and a data registry, right? Like, these are all the things that you're going to need to be able to run some tests. They're not too high concept. A page object is a class where you give it a driver at a certain state. You can do other stuff, but like that's the main thing, is you don't interact directly with programming something to tell it what to do in terms of elements on a page or the way things are laid out. You want to wrap that in functions that describe what a user's going to be doing on a page, so that other people that don't necessarily have the command of writing the Selenium page objects can use those to write scripts that can test your framework, or that can use data to do data-driven tests that can test your framework. Next, a data registry, very similar. It's basically an object that once you instantiate it, it has a list of data files that you're going to need to get access to. Again, this is for consumption of multiple levels of programming quality and programming aptitude, and if you do this, it eliminates, or it puts a set of boundaries on where are we going to be doing file pathing, where do I need to know how to open a file or handle a file. Like if you can put all of your file handling into one spot, that's very helpful for everybody that's trying to use your framework or what you've built. You're going to need WebDriver. This is new. This didn't exist when I started, and we can talk a little bit about WebDriver. WebDriver came out in 2008. It was proposed as a standard for the W3C, and that's when I started using it. I did not like the prior method of Selenium. Selenium RC is what it's called contemporarily. Selenium RC takes a bunch of JavaScript and it inserts it into the page to manipulate the page and carry out the actions, which sounds weird now, but in a pre-jQuery world where people were just writing their own JavaScript to do whatever they needed to do, writing their own JavaScript to do Ajax when it was first possible, like, you did not know what sort of namespace conflicts you were inviting by doing something like that, like inside of your code. So as a tester, I didn't find it very useful. But with what WebDriver proposed and what was eventually adopted by all the major browsers is, add a protocol to the browser where you can have JSON messages that you kind of like send to the browser, and it does stuff based on those messages. And so I can demonstrate that in a little bit, but we're going to get through the slides first. This site, sauce demo, it's a nice, simple little site. This is the site that when we get to making page objects, we're going to make page objects to test this site. So we get WebDriver from here. You can find the one for your build. We're going to test this site. And we have a repo too, which is Dakota Smith. It's GitHub, Dakota Smith's PyRVA stupid Selenium tricks. And so if you want to check that out right now, let me show you. We'll get Chrome going here, just so that folks can. So I just checked this stuff in like 2 hours ago because I was trying to figure out what to share and how much to share. It's kind of out of a repeated process of constantly doing this. I don't want to make it a set of modules because I don't want to support an open source program, but I'm perfectly willing to show people how to do it. And y'all can just go off and build your own lightsabers and cut your own legs off. So for my purposes, a couple of like groundwork, I'm assuming we're just going to be using one browser, that we don't need multiple browsers and a bunch of different screen resolutions and stuff. If you need that, use Sauce Labs. That's whose site we're testing against. They're great for that sort of thing. You just say, I want this browser on this thing. And they're like, OK, here you go. Totally different set of problems than what I'm trying to help with, which is like, how do I actually like write code that's somewhat maintainable, that's somewhat sane, and that helps me know what's going on when I'm dealing with Selenium. So let's see here. Keynote's done. Yeah, let's do this real quick. I want to show. I'm going to make this bigger. Yeah, that's fine. And I apologize for my weird terminal. I'm in between terminals that I like right now, and so I'm using this thing, and it's okay. Let me see if I can find this part of my notes, because this was an amazing little. This kind of like shows what WebDriver does, right? Like so. I have Chrome driver here in my bin dir, and so if I start that up here, it starts, right? Like, so I'm not using Selenium or anything right now. I've just started this binary, the Chrome driver binary, which needs to be in sync with the version of Chrome that you have. I can go to another window and make this one big too, and it's going to get really weird because the other one was already big. But if I do something like this, and I'm going to actually cheat and see if I can just show what this is instead of having to do it myself. Oh, you're not going to do it because we're not on. Oh, this is turned off. That's why. Because I didn't want people airdropping me stuff. That's why. In the middle of my talk. Boom. Okay. So now watch. This is great. If this works, live coding, right? But oh look, I opened up Chrome with a curl command to a binary, right? Like, and now, if I want, I can go to. Ooh, I didn't put in the session, right? Like, so this is what it's doing, right? Like, so it starts up a thing, and it gives me a session, and I needed to include that in my response, right? Like, so, and then here it tells me that I have a browser called Chrome, and I probably should have used something to prettify this so it was easier to see, but if I do this, and I go, and I swap out this session ID with the one from above, now, when we look back at the browser that we opened, it went to example.com, because I told it, URL example.com. So now when you see Chrome driver doing stuff, recognize that what Python is doing is it is sending these JSON messages to the Chrome driver binary, which can talk to Chrome to tell it what to do, right? Like, so that's the order of operations that we do to get through whenever Python fires up Selenium, it's actually just doing this right here, which begs the question, could you capture all of those commands? And could you play them back without even having to have Selenium or Python on a machine if you just had WebDriver and Chrome? That is an open question that other people could probably investigate. It might be possible. It seems really possible with just a little bit of regex, but I haven't like really gotten to dive in on that. Okay, so that's what Chrome driver is. So going back to my other notes, because that's from the fun notes. Let me go back to the talk notes here. So again, if you want to play with the repo right now, it is there. You'll need to install the environment, but it's pretty straightforward. So let's just exit that one, stop Chrome driver there, go back to my projector, and let's just fire up a browser and then step back through what it did. So I'm going to make it visible so we see the browser, because everybody loves seeing a browser fire up. So there's one and there's two. And it went to, there's two separate tests going to the PyRVA page. Not super exciting. And let's look at what we've got there. We have a very simple test that is just going to go to the page, and then we are asserting that as we look through all of the links and make a tuple of the link text and the href, that it matches this list that we have up here. This isn't a good test. I'm not advocating for tests this way. I needed a test in the repo that would show, hey, Selenium's configured correctly. Hey, your page objects are also configured correctly, because here's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into the page object now. This one right here is the base page. This is the page object that every page will inherit from, not just from one site, but from all sites. I'm a huge proponent of all systems that you want to test, put all of your page objects in one repo, write all of your scripts in that one repo, use your CI/CD to determine what tests to run and what page objects to use. But like, don't try to abstract stuff you're doing into a Python module that you can be installed as a library, because that's like a level of effort that isn't, effort and portability that like isn't necessary if you just work inside of a mono repo for all your page objects. So with this base page, what it is it is a abstract base class that does a little bit. And the main thing that it has is it has this validate page method, which has an abstract method. If you're not familiar with abstract base class, that means that every single class that inherits from this is going to need to implement this method. And if it doesn't implement this method, it's going to throw a type error the first time that class gets used. So it kind of, it's only at runtime, but it enforces, hey, I want you to have one of these on this class if you're a subclass in this thing. And so what that lets me do is what you see above here, where I'm going to take that method and I'm going to run a little private method that kind of is like, okay, I'm going to run you and I'm going to look for certain types of exceptions that I expect to happen. Every single time someone goes to a page, I want to assert that there's some sort of element that's available, and I want to assert that that I'm on the page that I thought I was on. So when this is implemented, we implement it in a subclass page, but it's not implemented here. So I'm in the test, that second test, I'm importing this, and I try to use it, and it raises a type error, and that's what I want it to do, because I didn't actually subclass it and implement the method that it's supposed to do. So that shows me that like the base method I've implemented what I wanted to here. So let's go back into the page object. So as I said, a page object mostly relies on a WebDriver instance. To do the WebDriver instance, we have a fixture at the top of the test that is basically going to call setup Chrome. Setup Chrome is a method that's in my utils or in my tailored directory. Tailored contains the parts of Selenium that I have to significantly configure or subclass to make work in a way that's sane and reasonable. And a lot of times, it sounds like because it's a configuration job that you also want to make it configurable, but I've rarely found that to be the case. There's like tiny pieces that you will want to change values of, but for the most part, you don't need to configure your Chrome setup separately every single time. So what I have in here is effectively a few sets of options that determine if we're running in a browser mode where the browser is visible. These are ones that work towards different goals of either, some of them are obfuscation, some of them turn off certain experimental switches like this one. Headless is going to make it to where it's running in the background. The user data dir is where it saves a profile if you make a profile for someone. And then shared options, this is stuff that I want inside of every time I run. And so it composes a list of options. It assigns them all to the Chrome driver here. It does a little bit more, automation-only items. This isn't quite using undetectable Chrome driver, but it's, on the margins. And then it starts off and it returns the driver. So a simple implementation, subclassing our base page for the sauce demo site. The first thing you see when you get to the sauce demo is a login page, and they tell you what the usernames can be, and they tell you the password for all the users. So a lot of times someone will want to work on something like this, and they will sit and think about what page objects they're going to make or what elements they're going to interact with. They'll look at something, they'll try to find, okay, and I'm sorry that this won't be completely readable, but there's an ID on the password. That's going to be super convenient, isn't it? So I'll show you how I add that here. Each page component has a base level and a locators level component. And so the locators class is just going to have separate fields where you can do stuff like that. So that's kind of silly. That's not going to do much. Now what? I'm going to make a method where I submit an email and submit a password. That's not super Pythonic to always write get and set methods. What is a little more Pythonic is the notion of using the getters and setters on an instance object, right? So if I do from util from tailored element import input element. So an input element is a completely subclass-based element, just abstracted away, where what you're going to do is you're able to just, if this is on a class because it's an attribute, it's a instance element, it's going to use the get and set methods on itself. And let me demonstrate what that is by setting up a couple of them. What it takes to start it off is a locator, and that's it. So if I want to make one of these on my page object, I would go to the logged out page here. And inside of it, I can just say email input equals input element, and then login locators. And this is why I like using classes and separate things from my locators, because it really streamlines like what I'm trying to do when I'm trying to have autocomplete help me out. Because there's just a lot to do. And then password input equals input element. And this is the new test that we're trying to put together, right? For we have a new page object. We're trying to hit this URL. We're trying to go and maybe even log in here. So one thing that we will need is we should inspect the login button. Actually, we'll save that for a little bit later. Watch this. So I want to do this. I want to say browser mode, but I want to run IPython. So IPython is a REPL. I like it a lot because it lets me think and use Python and Selenium at the same time. I don't have to think and then write Python and then run Selenium. I can just think and run Python and Selenium all at the same time. So how do I do that? First thing is I need my driver. So if I do driver equals setup Chrome, and I'm not going to have a profile path at first. So now I have a driver. I can take my driver and I can send it to the demo page. Where's the demo page? I can import the page object, the login page object that we're going to use, and I can instantiate one and pass it the driver, right? Because that's the one thing that it needs. Now I can say login page dot email input equals, and let's see, what did they say here? Standard user. Standard user. And this is the fun part, so I'm going to try to make this a little more visible when it happens if I can. Oh, look at that. It entered it right there. wow, Python's so cool. I wonder what's going to happen when I do it with the other one. And so this makes your scripts look nicer, and it makes your scripts look and act like Python, and it makes it to where when you're thinking, again, you're not thinking, oh, how do I set that value? Did I call it get this time, or did I call it, like, it makes it less arbitrary. You're following the conventions of the language. So now we want that button, right? Like, I assume Sauce Labs is not like engineers I've had to automate in the past, and that's actually a button. It's not, I'm going to assume at first that it's a button. So this is what we can do. Since we're here, I can say, I can use the driver that's on the page object. Conventionally, you're not supposed to do that in a script, but right now, this is investigative. I'm trying to find this. So I can say, find elements. Actually, I have that on my page object. What am I doing? Find elements, and then I want to do by, let's just say, tag name and button. There is not, oh no, it's mad at me because it just needs to be a tuple. And I'll explain why I know that in a second. Okay, so it's not a button. Doesn't look like it's a link either. Dang it, guys. This is why you should never live code. There it was. This is also why, like, this is what people hate about Selenium is because it's a Java project, and so a lot of times you're like, what is that in? And it's like opposite of what you think it would be in Python. It still hates me. Oh, it still wants it to be a tuple. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm doing that to myself. No, just not going to work. Is the driver going to find it? Did I screw up my... Let's see what it is. Let's solve the mystery. What are you, login button? Are you just like a div? Oh, you're an input type submit with a name of login button and a value of login, but you're an input type submit. So you're not a button. Mystery solved. So we're just going to add that now here. And at the beginning, in IPython, I ran a module called auto reload that I'm really hoping is going to do what it says on the package. So we're going to add that locator. Now, auto reload doesn't do it to the instantiated class, right? It will auto reload. Go ahead. Yes, thank you. Good catch. It's not going to affect the instantiated one, right? But if a login page is just a login page, it's just a wrapper around the driver. So I can just throw the old one away and make a new one. So if I just do login page equals login page driver, oh, it hated that because I didn't finish it. Amazing. But I can just finish it now. Find element by login locators, login button, and dot click. And then we'll show you what we would normally do here, but this is the fun part. So let's re-import that again. God hates me. Oh no, I get it. The driver's broken. Okay. I'm gonna pause for a second. What we're gonna do is we're going to start setting up the rest of the next test project. So here we go. We're going to make, inside of our test directory, we're going to make a new Python package, which is going to be the sauce demo tests. And we're going to test happy path tests. This is the existing test, and I just want the first part. Now we could move this into a conf test file, and so then that would get used there, and would be used by all of our PyTest. We would have that fixture available to us, so we probably want to do that. So conf test is a fun beast, but we shouldn't have to do much of anything. Okay. So if we just find this element, right, we know it's an input, or we know its ID is login button, right? There it is. Find elements is nice because find elements returns a list, whereas find element like looks for something, and if it doesn't find it, what find elements plural does is it'll give you an empty list. What find element singular does is it will just explode. So just know that when you're using it, that sometimes if you expect something to maybe not be there and you want to work that way, instead of doing a suppress or a try catch around a find element, just use find elements and expect the empty, work off the empty list. But if I have this single element, I click it, right, like it's going to take me to the next page, and it goes really fast, and it has this nice little page here where it has like 6 different items. And this is kind of what we would test, right? Like we would want to go through and we would want to like test these items match the data that we expect them to have. And so to that end, what we would normally do is we would have something like, you know, a local CSV file or something like that, and we would use that to compare what we're trying to find. What I like to do is so I have this data directory in my project where I put CSVs of users that are of certain types, or of, you know, sometimes like giant test data sets and other things that I have to like work with when I'm testing. And what I do is I wrap that in a registry where, for the purposes of this registry, it's very simple. It's just looking them up by an actual name. So let me just show you. If I just from data registry, when I instantiate this, right, what we have is we have like this class that has a dictionary automatically attached to it that I pickle every single time I add something to it, and then I just kind of keep it there, and it's just there. We can check it into the repo, and the only thing that is binary that you can't read in the repo is the little pickled object, but all the other files are still readable by humans, so you can sort of see what's going on when it's not an Excel file that's like really hard to diff. Finally, since it actually takes the hash of the file when it's adding it and records it, if anybody accidentally changes a file and commits that and it doesn't match the hash, you can choose to be like, oh, don't use that test file anymore. So it kind of keeps you from shooting yourself in the foot. And there's lots of reasons to not use this if you have databases, if you have other data providers that you can be using. But in some scenarios, you know, either that's not just provided for testing, or you're not doing testing. You're doing something, you know, more dynamic, where, you know, you're going to be working with a lot of data for managing state and users and whatnot. So I'm just showing that to just sort of show where we would get test data for our tests as we start to kind of put together the notion of what we want to do. Because when I look at this, you know, there's not a ton that you can test in this, right? Like positive path-wise. And I'm certainly going to demonstrate this, but you can add items, you can remove items, there's no quantity, there's resort. But when I go here, I can only remove. I can't buy 2 of these, even when I'm in my cart. There's a little box, but I can't do anything. So it's not a particularly exciting demo. I mean, you can buy with nothing in your cart, you know. I mean, like at this point, like it's hard to demonstrate what I would be testing because there's not a lot of failure state. I am happy to continue to talk about page objects and what we can do with page objects. We can continue to explore ones for this site. And I have one other thing, but I think it's just a little too weird for this part of the talk. Happy to take any questions right now, though. That's not the entirety of the talk. I am still going to keep going. I'm just like trying to pause for 1 sec. Yeah, what's up, Dave?
So at the beginning, you were connecting to the browser. It looked like a little server was running there or something. Talk about like, how does it actually work?
Yeah, so what Chrome driver is it is when you go, what you do is you go to, let me full screen this for us. So at this site here, they have little endpoints that tell you which ones are viable for your certain version of Chrome. So whatever version of Chrome you have, you need a certain version of Chrome driver, and as that transparently updates, eventually you run into problems where you're like, oh, something's failing. And it's typically your Chrome driver, and the Selenium error messages are not particularly good at helping you with that. But so when you download this, make sure you have the right one for your architecture. It'll run really slow if you don't learn that firsthand this week. And what it is it is a binary that is effectively a server that sits there being the middleman from the Python code that I'm writing using Selenium. Like the Selenium module in Python expects Chrome driver to be available to it to fire up on a certain port so that it can talk to Chrome. Earlier versions of Firefox didn't need that. They just opened those ports up directly in the browser. Chrome likes to do that for security reasons, because it makes it enforceable that Chrome driver is what enforces that a connection is local to the machine, and then the browser doesn't have to. It's too hard to enforce that the connection will be local to the browser because the browser is already dealing with so many network connections that Chrome driver itself only deals with traffic that as it comes in local, it's able to pass that on.
So your versions of Firefox still do this without the driver?
Yeah. Yeah, Firefox, you don't necessarily need a driver. But a lot of people have moved to Chrome driver because it is a little bit faster, and it's kind of Internet Explored everything, right? Like it's the corporate browser, and so if you're making something that can get away with supporting just one browser, a lot of times it's Google Chrome, or at least get away with something that your test automation is going to be in only one browser. Google Chrome also comes to the top of the list because they're all based on the same rendering engine anyway. What's up?
So one of the issues, one is, I've tried to do this before, but like kind of ran into problems. I think in the install process or kind of the setup process. Yep. That seemed hard at the time, just a while ago. But I don't know, it's gotten easier now, but like just getting everything set up so that it kind of work.
They've streamlined that. So the part of the process that you used to have to do to really, if you really wanted to get the maximum benefit from Selenium, was you had to run the Selenium jar file, which was like a Java file that was like a server that acted as a go-between. But by doing it that way, you were uncoupling yourself from locally running browsers and advancing to be able to use Selenium Grid. But now, either with built-in Selenium or with things like Selenium Base, for example. Selenium Base is so again, the thing I like about Selenium is it automates browsers. It's not a testing framework. It's not, there's a lot of things that it's avoiding saying that it is there. If you go to Selenium Base, it's an all-in-one test automation framework, right? Like, so if you want to use Selenium for testing, this is a great thing to use if you want to use it out of the box. Look through the source code and steal things from if you want their ideas, like just a couple of them and you already have something. This has so many features that I cannot even go into them. One of my favorite ones is not the visual testing, but so they have like a desktop application that like runs manual assisted automation, which is really wild when you think about what you could do to mitigate things that you can't quite automate by having it send it off to somebody in a manual step somewhere down the line. Yeah. again, Sauce Labs, I recommend if you do need to use a lot of different browser configurations. Browser Stack is good too. I just have better luck with Sauce Labs, have more experience with it. But I think the installation should be a little more straightforward. You definitely have to put the Chrome driver on your path somewhere, like whether it's Windows. And sometimes you can short circuit that by when it's Python, if the Chrome driver is on the path that you're running Python from, right? Like if you just copy it to your project directory right next to where you run Python from, it'll run there no problem. A couple of things that I just want to kind of go over just as like concepts to think about when you are trying to determine how tightly coupled your stuff is or not. I don't use any more unit test case. I just use PyTest and I just make test classes and I make them right there inside the file. Because I've found, it's in my experience, that a test case class ends up being a thing that you kind of just like shove everything into. Anything that you might need to manage some sort of state somewhere in your test. And so by getting away from that, you kind of keep yourself from having that problem. But that's leading me to my point, which is if you see yourself using driver or locators or elements or actually doing stuff like directly with Selenium or even directly doing stuff with the page itself, not through the page object within a test, like that needs to get abstracted and like pushed up into the test, right? Like that's a sign that like you've now coupled what this test is doing with your page, and now the test outcome isn't separate from the logic in the test. You can't move that somewhere else. You can't reuse it if you want to have another one. You'll just have to copy paste it. And then finally, just like non-browser things happening in your page objects. Are you doing a lot of string manipulation? Are you doing a lot of like transform on your ETL when you're trying to extract things out of a page? Are you doing a lot of parsing direct download, stuff like that, where you're like waiting for something inside of a page object where really that should be like sent off to a different type of object. And yeah, let's see here. Don't use XPath. I have some links that I will share that are really good. Let's just bring up all my notes here. But there's a couple of other talks. There's one talk by, I think his name's Derek Kiersey, and it's called Beyond the Page Object Model, which is just like really great. There's one called A Really, Really Fast Tour of WebDriver that's really great. And then there's also, if you're interested in IPython comes out of the Jupyter project, which, so if you know about Jupyter Notebooks, is IPython and the Jupyter are kind of the same group of people that made it. There's a really great talk by Joel Gruss, who's an AI data science guy. He wrote the book, The Python Intro to Data Science, or Data Science from Scratch. He has a talk that he gave at Jupyter conference. So he goes to the notebook conference and he gave the talk called I Don't Like Notebooks. And it's an amazing talk where he talks about using IPython in the same kind of workflow that you would use instead of using notebooks. So really, really amazing stuff. And yeah, I think that's about it. You
said don't use XPath.
If you can avoid it. So what I prefer to do over using XPath is I prefer to break, especially if it's a long chain of things, I prefer that to break that into an element or a sub-element. Like try to find the closest thing that I'm actually looking for that I can uniquely find, and then using Python and other elements traverse it, because then when that fails, you get a stack trace that shows you where in the DOM kind of it failed, whereas when an XPath that you just put in as a locator fails, you're gonna have to do that with your brain. Like you're gonna have to be like, oh, now it's the fourth div of this list, or whatever it is in a very complicated XPath. Another thing to watch out for in XPaths that's really beneficial, but if you're gonna ever internationalize your app, it's gonna bite you as soon as you have to do that, which is putting text matches inside of an XPath, right? Like if you have an XPath where you're like, in text is this, and now like your site's gonna be in Japanese, that's never gonna match anymore. And that should be in a message catalog somewhere, and then you could pull that into the locator, but try really hard, even in page objects, I try really hard to not use text to find things, or if I do, if I have to do it a lot, I make a different locators file called like text, where I'm just like, this is the text that I'm trying to find on this page, because you can kind of, it's not fun. It's not fun. Oh, here's one thing. Okay. I do have one thing to show. Okay. This is always drove me wild. Let me see if I can even find a thing. What's your question? While I find an example of what I'm doing.
Is I just get a script?
ID on a page? Yeah. For the most part, it like nothing enforces that it has to be except for like all the JavaScript libraries that everybody uses, right? Like so, for the most part, you're not going to run into that as much as you used to run into people being kind of like willy-nilly with IDs. But you can use any element attribute, and you can even come up with your own. You know, if you think about it, like right, here, this is what I wanted. What an element is. So if I show this, if what an element is, and this is something that's really fun about doing it this way, right? Is I can just go to a page. I don't have to tell it that. This is my Selenium browser. But so what an element is it's just the oh, Chrome failed. Oh, because we're running it on the other port. Right. It's right here. I mean, I see it not failing, guys, but do you really think it's not there? Oh, it's there. So, you know, any element, if I just get the first, you know, tag name, no, it's really not working. Let's just hop back in. And you can see there that in that session it had the little, it had, like if I go to my homepage, my new tab page, because I'm opening the same profile every time, I'm not doing the Selenium thing where you nuke the profile and start a new one. I'm opening the same profile every time so that if I wanted to, I could log in to my Facebook account. I wouldn't have to save my password anywhere. The session would be saved just like it's always saved when I'm on Facebook, if I wanted to do that. If I wanted to be logged into YouTube, if I wanted to be logged into any platform, I wouldn't have to put my credentials anywhere in my code base. I could just log in manually. When it fails, it sends me a message. I fire up this browser again. I log in manually. I save that session. So, you know, it kind of comes in handy for some stuff that you might want to do. So anyway, we have this driver here. I'm going to get like the first, you know, href. So the link, it's going to find one for me eventually. It has to wait for the page. And then the element, though, like you can see all of the inner attributes and all of the outer attributes, so you can look stuff up. What I'm getting at is you can look stuff up by anything that you see within the HTML. There's a method on an element to say get all attributes, and you could just iterate through them and be like, is this that attribute I'm looking for, and does it have the value I'm looking for? That's what Selenium does itself under the hood for the ones that it allows you to use. You can just do that yourself. It's not that hard to use your own locator strategy. So when, you know, one thing that helps sometimes is when there are sites that are accessible, accessibility labels are a great thing to find as is this the element that I'm looking for when the system under test is not under your control, or when you just have developers that are just like not going to accommodate you. So now I have this link, right, like as an element, and I can say, yeah, I can get a single attribute. You know, so if you want, you can do things like, you know, I can get the whole link and the SVG that's with it and all of the stuff, you know, so you can really get a lot more out of these than you might think. And again, I have an ad here. So if you're interested in ad fraud, it's pretty easy to commit. Like, who do you think pays for this click, right? Like a Selenium click. Oh, it didn't actually work. Dang it. All right, that's enough stupid Selenium tricks, I think. I can certainly keep talking about this for, you know, another 90 minutes, but I don't think we have the time. Of course.
So if you're doing this like an unintended, like a CXP server, you want to run your tests, you know, until. Like, how does that work? Okay, I mean, I'm just trying to.
Yeah. So we run at my job currently and at prior roles. I mean, we run parallelized Selenium tests against our after our deployment for it's not for like it's for just a post sanity check, but because they are long running end-to-end browser tests. So a lot of times what you do is you have a batch of smoke tests, that's your quicker running ones, if you're even interested in browser tests at that level, and then the end-to-end one comes later. But yeah, I mean, there's Docker containers for like Python and Selenium already together, ready to go. So then you just, start writing your tests using that setup, and you have everything that you need to plug it right into your CI/CD. Yeah. Yeah.
This is a little bit of a different question, but I'm curious if you've done any Gherkin with Selenium.
I haven't yet. What I like to do, because a lot of times sometimes what I'm doing is testing, and like test tools are good for that, but sometimes when you get into the boundary of like just wanting to automate something, sometimes those test tools come with a lot of opinions about how to configure things and where things need to live to run correctly. And I like to be able to have kind of like standalone scripts so the thing that I do to help with some boilerplate is I'm not dogmatic about only using my page objects in my tests. I will take the page objects, actor model it into a couple of other methods for stuff that I use a lot and use those throughout my tests or make those into fixtures. But yeah. This config is really fun to look at if you're ever wondering how to, by the way, like if you're ever wondering, the one that's in the repo, this is a really good config. It has a custom profile directory if you want it. So you can have like a custom user path, like I was showing. It has custom download directories if you want them. So it'll like whenever you click on something in Chrome just downloads it, it'll automatically download it. I'm not talking about trying to download a file with the file explorer thing. I'm talking about files that automatically download when you click on them. There's two different types of downloads that the browser can do. The ones that you have to actually interact with the file explorer, that'll never work. What you have to do is pass all of your cookies away to requests, and then you can download the file that way. Yeah. But yeah, this is, if you've ever wondered like why isn't my Selenium configured the right way, or why isn't it hitting this right page, like this config is basically, will help you work through that. And yeah, cool. I hope somebody learned something. Learn not to do whatever, oh no, that's something else. Cool. Mm-hmm. A little smacking is always okay.
So a feedback for either Dakota on catching questions for L3. Like well tonight, if you learn anything interesting, any feedback for how the evening went. Probably to help either Dakota improve or us, or just that this part was great.
One thing that would be cool would be, I have no idea. I mean, I guess I could have had Discord open on my phone too, but like I don't ever know if there's any additional questions. I guess you would just say them if there was.
Yeah.
Cool.
There are two people on this book, and I apologize that I forgot to share the camera. But usually, of course, I'm not behind my computer right now, so if they're asking questions, I can't see. But I don't want to sit behind my computer real quick. So. Not picking you, but.
Nick on just wanting just to share the scripts or the.
Yeah. Here, I'll hop in and do that.
Maybe also post a comment
Will do. Yeah, the last repo that I put together like this, which is also on my GitHub, which was for a talk, ended up, starting at least 40 other scraping projects. So I'm hopeful that some other folks will get something out of this.
Right, so like compared to coding. All right. Learn more about Selenium, but not ready to try. Well, look at the GitHub repo. So yeah, make sure that it's shared available. General idea: have the speaker submit a list of lines prior to links. Links.
Oh, yeah,
To share.
yeah. I have a.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that one's definitely gonna be good for me to keep in mind. Priority in general. Move from WebCookie talks. But then you wrote a whole bunch of WebCookie talks. Maybe a little bit more structure for the presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we use some really structured ones, sometimes we use some unstructured ones. Sometimes learning that goes well, sometimes
If there's definitely the version of this that I gave 8 years ago had more structure, but I didn't want to re-give the same like educational material, and so I sold y'all short on that. I'm sorry. Like I could have just reused the slides and been like, hey, let's talk about what makes a page object, but
I want to review the config to check options I don't know. Hopefully that would be some config of Selenium in general or for repo, but what in the repo?
Yeah.
Show at the end where it had all the options.
Yeah. There's been a lot of time spent digging through things, failing, and finding the right oracle inside of Stack Overflow. It's like, this is the secret Google command. I'm like, ooh, never saw that one.
We're excited for Selenium. Appreciate the demo. You can see the value.
Thanks, y'all.
Value add to digging your program.
Like, do you see value to actually getting the Chrome itself?
I mean, I'm fascinated with this notion of definitely there's going to be a lot of identifiers that are weird when you try to do it, but I'm really just as like a academic pursuit interested in the idea of can I take what Selenium does and just remove all the Selenium and just have Chrome driver do it? Because so there's two tactics that I've read about recently that people do to make it harder to detect, and one of them is that, and then the other one is just dumping the browser memory completely, and I'm not smart enough to do that one. So, and I can probably write I've already in my life written a bunch of really bad things using only curl, so I'm pretty sure I could do it again with enough time.
There's no documentation online. I'm really surprised.
Yeah, well, so it's kind of like there's a Chrome port that people use, that certain Chrome driver folks use, and I use it because you can enable additional performance logging, which allows you to read request headers and stuff like that, and response headers, which normally, again, Selenium doesn't give you. You have to introduce a proxy for. But what eventually it's going to be called is going to be BIDI, bidirectional Chrome driver, which is going to let you have a two-way communication with the browser itself. So the browser will be able to emit events back to you too if you set things into it. Yeah, it's gonna be tight.
And I want to try IPython for faster feedback.
I find IPython amazing for almost anything that I'm trying to do new. When it's pandas or I have some class that I'm trying to write something in, I can't convince you to do it, but if your way of doing it is I run a script and it breaks and I see the thing and then I change the script and then I run the script again, it is an improvement over that. If you have something that you already like that's more smooth than that, maybe it's not going to be an improvement for you. But yeah.
Do you care as much when we REPL versus doing the no code?
I like the REPL more than the notebook because for me, the notebook, I've just had to work around a lot of teams with bad notebook habits, and the REPL like doesn't let you stay there as easily. Like you end up where it's like at some point inside of the REPL, you can type history and almost copy your whole class out of it into your file or whatever. And actually, you can write into the file if you wanted to.
I didn't do it, but I guess one feedback I had was I really like your code, but I didn't realize until like halfway that was your code. I thought you really showed, you know,
Oh, yeah.
from like the Selenium side, and I realized, oh, this is your custom library that you built.
Yeah, I should have been. It's kind of like the way that you do need, if you're, almost anything you want to do with Selenium, you have to have a framework for.
Yeah.
You know, like, and
I finally realized what you're doing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is kind of why I mentioned Cypress and the other ones is because they're a little more batteries included for testing, right? Like if you are a front end developer and you want some tests, I would never say use Selenium. I would never say use Selenium. If you have a team of QA people that know Selenium, I would say use Selenium. If otherwise, I would say what do they want to use? Do they want to use Playwright? Do they want to use Cypress? I would probably never recommend Cypress, but you know, Playwright or Puppeteer, and those tools. They work similarly, but again, like they come with a lot more out of the box that behooves testing and test results and test artifacts. That sometimes doesn't really work towards the more general browser automation stuff. Yeah. Of course.
And then lots of our businesses mentioned that we have a Python license.
I got mine for free here. That PyCharm I was using.
Is there anyone who's interested in the Python? Just one? Great. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have raffle, and I'm gonna suggest write your name, and email address on the post-it note, and I'll grab it from over here.
You're really undersold though that you can use it for anything. You don't have to.
Yeah, it does have to be programmed specifically if you went somewhere with any of the other JetBrains.
Sea Lion. One day I'll write Rust code.
Anyone else? Everyone else already have a license? Thank you.
Yeah, dude.
Well, it's Dakota pick.
Boy. La 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 la. This one right there. This one.
The winner is Abdullah.
Cool.
Chris, he's the one who manages the licenses, and he'll get in touch with you. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. In 2 weeks, we have coding here. There's not a scheduled conflict. They are meeting elsewhere. So they have met here, but they're not going to be here. So that was a cool place. And learn some more Python. Thank you all for doing it. Stop recording.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, like you were doing some good coding principles there. Clean code.
Yeah, it's not very documented.